the running theme throughout my book, Hidden History, was that while the names change, the agencies certainly don't. In fact, new ones are often created and add to the mess. But it's the same kind of organized corruption. Regardless of Trump's sincerity, if Trump is really sincere and he really can do anything like this, just him being in office and the hatred focused on him nonstop by the establishment has served to out them.
Hey friends, Sean from SGTreport here. Before we get started with our good friend and author, Donald Jeffries, I just want to let you know this one is brought to you in part by our friends at Rugged Reserves. Would you like to get your hands on the ultimate survival backpack set? They were kind enough to send me one, and mine's camo. I'll try to shoot video of it for the next spot, but this is a super legit expandable backpack, and it only weighs about 3 pounds, and it can hold up to 2,470 cubic inches worth of gear. It comes with a water bottle, mesh pocket, 2 shoulder straps, removable waist belt, water bladder for long hikes, an LQ EMT survival blanket, and a fully packed first aid kit. Guys, check out this backpack for your loved ones or for yourself, and you'll be ready for everything crazy going on in the world or even crazier hikes. It also makes an excellent bug out bag. Take advantage of their 50% off sale and pick up this expandable tactical backpack for as low as $79.99. And they're also offering free shipping if you act right now. Visit GetReadyPack.com. That's GetReadyPack.com. The link is below this video. And now, friends, without further ado, it's so great to have you, and it's so great to have back my friend, author, and researcher Donald Jeffries. His book, you may know. If you don't know it, I'd suggest you buy it right now. It's called Hidden History, an expose of modern crimes, conspiracies, and cover-ups in American politics. And I spoke with Donald 4 or 5 months ago, and I wanted to speak with Donald again about John McCain. Who was the man, really? We just saw the funeral in which General Mattis and General Kelly absolutely eyeballed one of his partners in crime, Lindsey Graham, after Huma Abedin swept in to give him a hug. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Trump declassifying the FISA memos and so much more. And author Donald Jeffries joins us right now. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Well, it's good to have you back. We reached out to each other via email after we saw that funeral footage of Lindsey Graham looking like he was ready to eat his tie to get out of there as he was being absolutely eyeballed by General Mattis and General Kelly after that known criminal, traitor, treacherous, seditious Clinton puppet, Huma Abedin, swept in to give him a hug and evidently whispered something in his ear. Did you see that footage?
Yeah, and it was another illustration of this phony left-right paradigm, because presumably Huma Abedin should be the arch enemy of Lindsey Graham and the opposing party, but obviously they're not. And just as John McCain was being revered by the establishment media that supposedly hates conservative Republicans more than I wrote at the time. I wrote an article that appeared. I wrote a lot for American Free Press, and I wrote an article about McCain and then the worship of him. I've never seen anything like it. It was as if George Washington had died. And if you look at his career, he was the farthest thing as possible removed from a real hero.
Well, I just think what's going on right now is just absolutely historic across the board. And let me just play a clip for you. And we can debate whether or not Kasich misspoke. My argument from day one is that he misspoke and he meant to say put to rest instead of put to death. But listen to this clip. This is Ohio Governor John Kasich on CNN.
It's like 24 hours since John McCain was put to death. And look at
put to death. It just causes so much speculation because of the idea of military tribunals being set up to target those who have been traitors to the Constitution. And John McCain's biggest fan on Twitter for a very long time, Donald, was Linda Rothschild. Literally, nobody cheerlead that guy more than Linda Rothschild. I think we know very well who McCain served, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just from his entire time, his disgraceful record is, McCain's entire political career was built on the fact that he was a POW. He never let anyone forget that, and the media certainly never let Americans forget it. That was his entire basis on running for office. But this is a guy who was morally reprehensible. And most people don't realize his first wife, who had been a former beauty queen herself, was in a terrible car accident during McCain's years in captivity. And she felt so much, she was a true hero. His first wife was, where she didn't even want him notified about her being in an accident because she thought he had too much on his plate. When the guy got back, she was in a wheelchair, temporarily confined to a wheelchair, had also gained a great deal of weight. And McCain had a record as a womanizer going way back as well, and he left her, in pretty short order for a younger woman who just happened to be the heiress to a beer fortune. She later became an addict to prescription drugs, was caught stealing prescription drugs. Nothing happened to her, which is what, pretty much par for the course with the one percenters of the world. They're above the law. And, in McCain's case, he can, even though he was a member of the Keating Five, people somehow, I've never seen another politician who was involved in a scandal that was actually reported pretty much in the mainstream media, unlike a lot of other scandals are covered up. And yet his career, unlike the rest of the members of the Keating Five, his career pretty much took off afterwards. It didn't affect him one iota. He was really just a disgraceful man, both personally and politically. I don't know that he was, at least from looking at it from my perspective as a populist, I don't know that I've ever seen him take a stance on an issue I agreed with.
Well, it's interesting to hear you talk about the Keating Five and the scandals he'd been involved with, and it never hurt his career as a politician, nor did it limit the cheerleading by the Mockingbird mainstream media who supported him over all these years, the right and the left. I mean, CNN bent over backwards to praise him upon his death. And you know who I think parallels that on the left? Hillary Clinton. Knee-deep in corruption and scandals her entire career, and never ever were her feet held to the fire by CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, or the Mockingbirds. They just love her. They love the hardcore criminals. And I'm sure you know this, Donald. Hillary Clinton, like John McCain, enjoyed the endorsement of Linda Rothschild. That they had that in common.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and you're right. Hillary Clinton is kind of the left version of, if you think of McCain being on the right, the establishment right, I guess. And I think that's why a lot of us, even putting Trump aside for whatever, just looking at people like Manafort and that are, if they're to be punished, even if we agreed or believed everything that they say about these characters in their kind of two-bit petty offenses, if they're even guilty of that, it just really irks someone like me who's been investigating politics, researching and writing about it for a long time, to think of people like John McCain going to his death, not being punished for any of his crimes and scandals, in fact, being revered like a hero, and someone like a Hillary Clinton, who clearly is never going to be locked up, despite the cries of people at Trump rallies. Nothing's going to happen to her. And when you have people with that kind of track record, going back to what I wrote about hidden history, I wrote a whole chapter on the Clintons, and her scandals alone are just unbelievable. Going back to the cattle shares thing, not to even mention their body count, but the fact that she's untouchable, and some two-bit character like a Paul Manafort is held out to be some kind of a villain. I just, and the left kind of celebrates this as if he's a powerful figure, and the truly powerful still remain unpunished. And it may be, as you said, because they have the people, the international people that really run the world, a lot of us think, people like the Rothschilds.
Well, I'll play some of that footage of Mattis and Kelly eyeballing Lindsey Graham at McCain's funeral, because I think it's very, very telling. It's very important. I think the tide has turned here, and I really do believe there is, as Q says, panic in D.C. I don't know if you saw this, but Q Post 2202, panic in D.C., Lynch talking. Boy, would it be amazing if Loretta Lynch is talking about what really happened on the tarmac. And as President Trump signs an executive order demanding that the FISA memos be declassified, Representative Adam Schiff tweeted on the 17th, President Trump has intervened again in a pending investigation by ordering the selective disclosure of classified materials he believes to be helpful to his defense. The DOJ and FBI have previously informed me that release of some of this information would cross a red line. Now, here's the thing, Donald. Adam Schiff has been named by Q as being one of the hardcore criminals, potentially being involved in human trafficking, his ties to the Standard Hotel.
Mr. Schiff is a co-conspirator in an effort not only to undermine this president, but to destroy this president and violate the Constitution by subverting the election. He knows that what was done prior to the election and after was a criminal conspiracy with Brennan, Clapper, Comey, Strzok, Page, Baker, Prystep, McCabe, everybody involved in it. And what they are doing now is they don't want any of this information to come out, because if it does, and as it comes out gradually, it will show categorically that they engaged in a criminal conspiracy to frame a sitting president of the United States.
And it really prompted me to reply to his tweet by saying, "There's nowhere to hide, Representative Adam Schiff. Not even CNN can ignore the crimes of the deep state now. Obama and Clinton's sedition, and your crimes too, are about to be laid bare for the world to see. That's the red line you don't want crossed. You're out of firewalls and time." And I think it's very important what Donald Trump is doing. He promised transparency. He wants the classified stuff the deep state doesn't want seen in those FISA memos released to the public. And that will tell the full story, won't it?
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I don't know how anybody could object to the release of, sunshine laws are needed everywhere. And certainly we have so much material that's classified that never belonged to classified in the first place, and certainly doesn't belong classified now. But it's interesting that these are the same people. And presumably Representative Schiff, and I agree with you, he's about one of the worst of a very sorry lot we have in Congress. He's right at the bottom of the list there. But I'm presuming that he would probably was one of those who was criticizing the Republicans for not releasing maybe some documents that are still related to Kavanaugh. I'm not sure, but it's selective release of. I mean, to me, release everything. None of this it has anything to do with national security. And let's see what the information actually shows, and let the people judge for themselves for once, not the overpaid media heads on CNN and the like.
Now, you know as well as I do that the deep state and the shadow government are both very similar things, right? So when Hillary was at the State Department, evidently she set up what she called the seventh floor shadow government. That's been dismantled by this president. So let's talk about the deep state. What is it in your mind, and do you think I am being a little bit too elementary to say the deep state, as exemplified by Mueller, Clapper, the CIA, FBI, etc., is the deep state, and they're no longer deep, they're no longer hidden, and anybody paying attention can see what the deep state is? I think these are the same agencies in the same deep state that may have played a role in killing President John F. Kennedy. Are we seeing the deep state, the same people, the same agencies, the same entities, the same octopus tentacles that were perhaps involved in the murder of John F. Kennedy?
Absolutely, and that's the running theme throughout my book, Hidden History, was that while the names change, the agencies certainly don't. In fact, new ones are often created and add to the mess. But it's the same kind of organized corruption, and the overlying theme is to keep up the orchestration with diversions, and that's why this Judge Kavanaugh thing, as I call it, a sideshow, because it's diverting attention away from where it should be, and people are constantly getting diverted from that. And Trump, regardless of Trump's sincerity, if Trump is really sincere and he really can do anything like this, just him being in office and the hatred focused on him nonstop by the establishment has served to out them. Regardless of Trump's personality or whatever he may actually believe, they're showing themselves. You're right, the deep state is showing themselves. Now, whether enough people care, I don't know. The sad part is that so many people, the people that hate Trump, hate him so much that they would root for the worst people in the world, people they know are corrupt, the CIA and the other intelligence agencies, people like Chris Cuomo and Anderson Cooper, awful people that they acknowledge are lying about the Kennedy assassination and 9/11 and everything else significant. They understand that these people lie for a living, but somehow their hatred of Trump is so intense that they believe them and they actually root for them on in that particular instance. And so you can't help but sit there and hope that Trump is successful, at least to some degree. But at this point, he really does seem to be a man alone in Washington, D.C. As I've commented before, he appears to be alone within his administration. We see, people like Nikki Haley that has come out this week and with her typical, war hawk comments constantly, which I think her and Bolton especially, whatever Trump's instincts may be, if he does want to scale back all these wars and try to concentrate on actually building up America, which is what he promised to do and what needs to be done, people like that are working against those interests all the time. And they're trying to distract him. with, Syria's doing this, Iran's doing that, or whatever. But these were never Trumpers that was in his administration. So as far as I can tell, I mean, not even always his own daughter. His own daughter appears to, and son-in-law appear to be working against Trump most of the time. So whatever he's going to accomplish, he's going to have to accomplish it himself. As far as within that swamp, he would have to be doing it completely alone, because I don't see anybody else. Maybe Rand Paul, a few people like that, a few other people in Congress, but he's doing it alone. So it's a monumental task.
I want to ask you this, and this is pure speculation. I want your opinion on the odds that some of these hardcore traitors and criminals will be perp walked and brought to justice sometime during this Trump presidency. People like Hillary Clinton, John and/or Tony Podesta, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Your thoughts, boy, there's a litany of names I could point to, but your thoughts on it, because we're hearing that Lisa Page is singing like a canary and cooperating. According to Q, evidently even Loretta Lynch maybe is. If there is actual panic in D.C. because the deck is no longer stacked because Hillary Clinton's not in the White House, she can't fix this for everybody at this point. And they never thought she would lose. Give me odds on, well, let's start with Hillary Clinton.
Well, I would say, normally, I would say there's a 0% chance that someone of Hillary Clinton's stature within the establishment, someone who has been a deep swamp creature since the 70s, when she was fired during the Watergate committee for doing her thing, even at that time at a young age, she was even alienating other liberals. I would say there's a 0% chance, but I also thought there was a 0% chance that the establishment would allow Hillary Clinton to lose the presidential election. So I'm still kind of recoiling from that, because I didn't think there was any chance that Donald Trump will be elected. So who knows? I mean, at this point, I would say I would ratchet it up to maybe 10, maybe even 20%. But the problem is it's going to be such a battle, because the entire establishment, no matter what evidence, we used to like to say when Bill Clinton was president that he could have been, videotaped shooting somebody on the White House lawn, had the smoking gun in his hand, the dead body at his feet, and he would still have that 40% of the people that supported him still supporting him. And I think that's that ideological split we have, this left-right paradigm. The people on the left, especially now because they have such a focus of their hatred in Donald Trump, who they really hate way more than they did George W. Bush or somebody like that. Because of that, they are willing to, I've read people that I know were critical of Hillary Clinton on the left before that have now just forgotten all that. And they act like, things would have been so much better if she'd been elected. So certainly, you may get people down like Lisa Page, that level. People there, possibly you could see something like that. I would be shocked to see the Podestas, but certainly if that happened, especially if the Podestas came in, presumably you would get the whole Pizzagate child sex slave ring thing. That happens, then you're talking about revolutionary stuff, because that could bring the whole house of cards down. Because if that stuff is peeled back, and the masses out there, all those soccer moms that may like Hillary, if they see that these guys really, which I believe they were, and so many other powerful people were really engaged with this awful, awful stuff of running child sex rings, having sex with children themselves, I think then that support just goes away for them.
Oh, I think so too. And just a couple thoughts. I'm just astounded that people on the left would still support Hillary Clinton when her crimes are legion. I mean, they know, so many people on the left know that the DNC stole the election from Bernie. I mean, Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to resign because of that as the chair of the DNC. And she was almost, universally loathed. So let me ask you this. You mentioned that Hillary Clinton was fired from the Watergate committee. And that really is a great segue to this clip I want to play from an interview on Johnny Carson, The Tonight Show, with Jim Garrison, who at that point, you'd probably know this. What was his title back then? New Orleans District Attorney?
New Orleans District Attorney, right?
Yeah.
Yep, New Orleans.
Yeah, listen to this clip, because, this really rounds out our conversation. We talked about the deep state and the wide open now, and Jim Garrison laid it out for the American people. This was just 4 years after JFK's assassination. He's on the Johnny Carson show. And watch Johnny Carson play gatekeeper, just like we see Anderson Cooper and Wolf Blitzer do at CNN. Listen to this.
The executive order, which forbids every person in this audience and every person listening to this program, which forbids them to look at this evidence until September in the year 2039, was issued by the President of the United States. Does that answer your question? He's suppressing it.
Yeah, I'll pause it there. I'll tell you, is that not, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Jim Garrison was telling the American people the truth on The Tonight Show back in what? That would have been 1967, 68?
Yes, I think it was 67, yeah. And that's, you know, I'm very familiar with this, obviously, the JFK assassination. I actually teach a course, my adult education. Amazingly enough, my county's adult education program lets me teach a course on Oliver Stone's JFK. So the director's cut has that scene of him being on The Tonight Show. Jim Garrison was very much, for people who are interested, the hatred that Trump is getting is unprecedented for anybody who's ever seen. But if you want to go back a ways, Jim Garrison, look at the way he was treated by the media and the establishment. That little snippet there from Johnny Carson was a prelude to what happens every night on talk shows with Trump. I mean, people like Seth Meyers and Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, what little I can see of their shows, it appears to be a stand-up act that is just simply directed to refute Donald Trump and just to make the same points over and over again about how much they hate him and how obnoxious he is. And I've never seen anything like it. I mean, literally, it's as if the DNC is writing those scripts. But you mentioned earlier about the theft of the nomination from Bernie Sanders, and I think the reason why Hillary Clinton didn't have the support, you're right, before the election, but I think everyone just kind of expected her to win, and the hatred for Donald Trump really didn't become so intense until after he was elected, and then suddenly the left, people who really didn't like Hillary Clinton and wanted Bernie Sanders, suddenly then they lost their collective senses, and then they became the pussy hat wearing people that just are jumping up and down and screaming and make it go away. I mean, that we're still at that stage. Halfway into the presidency, they just want him gone. And I've tried to tell, you can't, even if you believe the stuff about Trump, you can't, can you possibly impeach somebody for paying off a hooker or a porn star when he was a private citizen? I mean, that's if in fact he did that, but that's where they are. They just want to find anything they can. And unfortunately, Bernie Sanders let a lot of people down because most of those people that supported him, he never went after the real crime. And that the whole Russia fantasy, the whole Russia collusion thing was born out of the very real corruption those WikiLeaks emails revealed, which was that the DNC conspired to steal the primaries and give the nomination to Hillary Clinton. The Russians didn't conspire to steal the election from Hillary Clinton, but somehow the mainstream media has twisted that, and now half the country believes that fairy tale.
Well, let me ask you this then. What do you think the significance is of the declassification of the FISA memos? Because the FISA spying, right, the FISA warrant that was issued that allowed the illegal spying on then candidate Trump is seditious, and it's illegal, and it was all green-lighted by Obama. If the truth comes out about what the deep state was doing to Trump when he was a candidate, and if the truth finally at some point comes out about who the actual DNC leaker was, they weren't hacks by Russians that got to the Podesta emails. It was an insider named Seth Rich, we believe.
Exactly.
So what is the significance of all this? I don't think even people on the left, the hardcore left, if they care at all about the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and rule of law, if they have any brain cells to rub together at all, once this stuff spills out and they can see what's been going on, I'd have to believe as Americans we can find common ground.
Well, I hope so. And certainly it's a good strategic move. It's the right thing to do. Always, I think, to release information to the public is a good thing. And it's a good strategic move for Trump. And so because I don't think how you can argue this, but I at this point, I don't think there's anything he can do to please that half of the country that hates him. And now these documents would have to have absolute smoking guns. As you mentioned, there's already been information out there that the Obama administration conspired to spy on candidate Trump and so forth. We know that, but the left, again, they hate Trump so much. I really think, again, using the old Clinton analogy, I think you could have Barack Obama beating him over the head with a baseball bat in a video. And that half of the country really has lost its collective sense, common sense. And you can see that if you watch videotape of some of these rallies and protests where they really don't even, and they've been questioned, they really don't even know what they're protesting. And at InfoWars, back when they were doing better work, they would go out and try to talk to these people, and they would just make noises or threaten them physically or cover their face and crazy. How do you possibly reason with people like that? So I don't know that those kind of people are going to be impressed with documents or even going to take the time to read them. And of course, we have to depend on the media, which we know is completely corrupt, to report, correctly and accurately what is in those documents. So if those documents do show clearly that the candidate Trump was spied on, can we trust CNN to report that accurately, or will they put it in some kind of context? Well, somehow they'll throw the Russians in or something. So I agree with you. It should be significant, but I think we'll have to wait and see, because unfortunately the entire news media is just aligned against anything anything good Trump tries to do. They are just completely aligned against him.
Yeah, they are, and they are true mockingbirds, in the grand old tradition of the CIA's Project Mockingbird. I mean, these people are bought and paid for, and I don't think it's ever been more obvious, again, to anybody paying attention, to anybody who cares about rule of law, which is why so many people were turning out for Trump at those rallies.
Yep.
He was speaking common sense. He was talking about returning the government to the people. And you'll remember during the inauguration, he said the very same thing. We're not just merely transferring power from one administration to another.
Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning, because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
I think to some degree there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, and I do believe that because of that, because of what we're seeing with the deep state aligned against Trump and Trump doing his level best to fight back and expose the deep state, he takes his case to the American people via Twitter on a daily basis. We are actually seeing panic in D.C. So when you think about the thousands of sealed indictments, etc., do you think it's possible that the panic, as Q says, is real, and maybe Lynch is talking because Page is talking, and maybe Tony Podesta is talking, and maybe a bunch of people who have been secretly indicted and we don't even know it yet are talking? You could see how the dominoes would begin to fall very, very rapidly as people run for cover to try to protect themselves from charges of sedition and treason.
Yeah, all it would take would be a few people to talk. And Donna Brazil, earlier, I guess earlier this year, maybe late last year, seemed to be doing a little of that too. I don't know if it was in relation to Seth Rich or what, but all it would take, somebody. You would have to have more than one person, because they could scapegoat an individual person. But if they think there's if the Podestas think there's a real chance that they could end up behind bars, certainly I think that goes back to a lot of the things I wrote about in history. And Ron Brown, who was as corrupt an official as you're ever going to find, the former head of the DNC, whose
plane went down.
Yeah, whose plane went down, but before, and not only that, his plane went down, but apparently he had a bullet hole in his head that they found they covered up. So
yeah,
I
remember that. I think he survived the crash, and he was taken out by a black ops team on the ground.
Well, he definitely, I believe he was a Clinton body count victim, and but all indications are that before that happened, he was saying he wasn't, because he was under investigation for a variety of his, it's kind of his lifetime of corruption. And he basically told the Clintons, I'm not going down alone. And I think if you get people like that saying today, because these guys know where all the bodies are buried, the Podestas, people like that, they're not just in it by themselves. It's not just a few corrupt people. That's why when Trump called it a swamp, it's accurate. It's a huge swamp. Everybody's in it. So to try to just get one of these creatures, I think anybody would object, whether you're corrupt or not. You're going to object to being singled out. It goes back to being a little kid. If everybody's doing something wrong and you're singled out, you're going to say, what about all them? What about what they were doing? So, I think at the most basic level, I can easily see any of these people turning, and I certainly hope they do, because God knows, Trump, when you talked about his wonderful inaugural address, that gave me so much hope. I think it was the greatest inaugural address since JFK's. And I waited my entire life, I'm 62, to hear people say what I'd been saying behind closed doors, about the awful state of our infrastructure and what a joke we are, and that kind of thing, the things, and to talk about immigration, things like that we see in our daily lives. So he gave so much hope to so many people, but we can see how difficult it's been. I mean, the whole basis for calling Trump a racist, for instance, goes back to him simply meeting with the family of that poor woman that was killed in California by an illegal immigrant. And somehow, just by talking to a family, and that's what this deadly political correctness does in the left, why somebody like me, who really is pretty much a left-wing populist, why I can't get along with those people. Because I cannot possibly think that it's offensive to say that an illegal immigrant killed somebody, rather than it's offensive that the murder was offensive. But that's the way a lot of people on the left think, and that's people don't realize that's really the only so-called evidence that Trump is a racist. It stemmed from that, when he simply called out, and then he met, I forget the name of the group, the Angels or something, the family members who've lost loved ones to illegal immigrants' crimes. People, they started objecting to that. These are the same people that create those kind of organizations for any of their causes, but this didn't fit their cause, so they just objected to it and immediately just called it racist. So I'm certainly hopeful, as much as I can be. And every time Trump, because every time I think he's backing off and I'm losing hope, and then he'll make another stupid appointment, then he comes up with something like this, where it shows that the fight is still there in him. And but I tell you, at this point, I couldn't blame him if he did give up, because he's taken so much. You would have to have the kind of ego he has to be able to nightly turn on that television and just hear the most awful things said about you nonstop. And I can't imagine what that's like. And I certainly feel for his family, and especially his young son, who is, as you know, has been attacked as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, I mean, the narrative, this idea that if you're not for open borders, you're a bigot or a racist, that narrative is falling apart all over the world. It's falling apart in the EU as well. And it's a globalist New World Order talking point. And it's no wonder that Hillary Clinton and John McCain both had the support of Linda Rothschild. I mean, that's the Rothschild agenda. You destroy all these countries, you destroy the sovereignty of all these countries, and then you take them all over with a one world government. And I think what's really hopeful here, and we can kind of come full circle, is the idea that, look, Hillary Clinton said it best herself, reportedly in a fit of rage right before the election. She said something, and I'm paraphrasing, if that bastard wins, we'll all hang from nooses. Yeah. And they never thought she would lose. So their backup plan was what? Russiagate? Their backup plan was what? Stormy Daniels? I mean, they've got nothing tangible in terms of criminality on President Trump, which is why their narrative is so weak and falling apart at the seams. And the good news, folks, is, I'm going to read this tweet from Lisa Mae Crowley on Twitter, and I quote, "Listening to the Larry O'Connor show on WMAL, John Solomon confirms Lisa Page and Bruce Orr have been cooperating witnesses. We, of course, already knew this. Future proves past." And she includes this from Q. "Do you notice a pattern? May 4th, 2018. Bruce Orr demoted 2 times, cooperating witness, power removed. House testimony, Peter Strzok, cooperating witness, power removed. House testimony, Lisa Page, cooperating witness, power removed. Bill Priestap, cooperating witness, power removed, to be called. Mike Corton, cooperating under resigned title, to be called. Who are they cooperating with? Do you believe in coincidences? The more you know, Q." So then we remember all of the resignations. We remember all of the sealed indictments. Boy, I tell you what, however the cookie crumbles on this thing, Donald, you and I and anybody listening ought to be damn glad they're not part of this Clinton cabal. If you've been involved for decades in these crimes, if your name is John Podesta, Tony Podesta, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, you're probably quaking in your boots right now. If your name is Huma Abedin, I mean, look at Huma going in to that funeral to hug Lindsey Graham, and she's absolutely being eyeballed by the men who now have some power. I just think it's a heck of a time to be alive and watch all this unfold.
It is. I mean, I've said many times this would be a fantastic science fiction movie if we didn't have to live through it. We just have to hope that that something doesn't come out of it that's like a Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome thing. Because a lot of us people think that, and I thought for a long time, I don't see how the system can sustain itself. Just an economic collapse could happen easily eventually if we don't take the right necessary reforms. Now we have someone in there now who at least is attempting to do something different on at least some levels. But immigration was a key issue for me. And as you mentioned, without borders. But again, I'm so disillusioned by so many people on the left, because you have this thing where now it's graduated to where they want ICE abolished. Where when you're saying that, and I've tried to say, okay, if you don't have immigration laws, you don't have a nation. I mean, as Trump said during his campaign, you either have a nation or you don't. And so, or do people really want to have? Because without that, that's when you pave the way for the world government they've wanted for so long. You can't even reach your local school board representative on the phone. Do you really think your world representative, you'd be able to get some kind of representation out of them? But I don't know what people want. But people are so, I don't know why they're so enamored with. To me, I've seen what immigration has done in my industry in IT with the visa worker program, which they've completely taken over, because they can hire foreign workers for half the price they had American workers. And certainly at the bottom end, people from Mexico coming across have taken over the landscaping industries and things like that. And construction. Construction used to pay pretty well, but not anymore. And so it has a disastrous impact on wages and benefits. And obviously, we don't need more people, but we have our resources are tapped out to begin with. Now we don't have enough jobs for the people here, but you can't talk to people on the left about that, because they are so into political correctness, and because the undeniable fact that most of the immigrants are non-white, they can't go again. They have to bring them in. And it's absolutely insane. The country has been committing suicide on this issue for decades. And Trump was really the first. I never thought a presidential candidate would say the kind of things he said about immigration. So if he can succeed on that issue at all alone, he's a tremendous success in my book.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I know we could go another hour, but I think in the interest in keeping this thing sort of digestible for people, we'll end it here. But I'd be glad to have you back on here in another few months if you'd like to come back on. But in the meantime,
anytime.
Remind people about your blog. I know you just posted a brand new article, and tell people where they can get your book, Hidden History.
Okay, well, you can get Hidden History, and my new one I have, the later one, The Survival of the Richest. They're both available through Amazon, both Skyhorse Publishing. You can find in Barnes & Noble bookstores. I write regularly on my blog, which is donaldjeffries.wordpress.com. It's called Keeping It Unreal, after my novel, The Unreals, which was published years ago. I write regularly about there. I also write regularly now for the American Free Press, which I think is one of the best little independent newspapers out there now. So people can find my work there. I mean, I write alongside people like Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul's work appears, Paul Craig Roberts, people like that, good people that are trying to expose things that you're not going to get anywhere else in the mainstream media.
Yeah, true journalists, right? Truth tellers, the real media. That's why people come to SGT Report too, because it is the antidote to corporate propaganda in the lies that are parroted by the mockingbirds, the highly paid multimillionaire mockingbirds like Wolf Blitzer, Anderson Cooper, the whole crew over there at MSNBC. And we're all just sick and tired of it. And my special thanks to our guest, Donald Jeffries. Donald, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Yeah, my pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for your support. We very much appreciate it. A special shout out to our patrons. Thanks for all you do on our behalf. We very much appreciate it. And for real news 24/7, visit us at SGTreport.com. God bless.
War has been declared by those people that are creating extreme weather events worldwide. The perpetrators have determined the minimum and maximum amount of lives to be destroyed annually in a continued, overt, silent system of warfare.